Welcome to Coach Life 2.0, the podcast that offers a behind-the-scenes look at life as a coach. Through the personal stories and first-hand accounts of experienced coaches, this podcast offers valuable tips and tricks for embracing your own coaching journey and learning how to lead yourself and others more authentically. All right, Rob, thank you so much for joining me today. Really looking forward to talking about your journey as a coach, the good, the bad, lessons learned, lessons continuing to be learned on a day-to-day basis. The first one I love opening up the conversation with is just why coaching? Why coaching for Rob?
You know, it's a great question, and it probably changes a little bit. I imagine. I was thinking about it actually this morning, as I was reminding myself of some of the things we would talk about today. I feel like a lot of it has to do with the fact when I was younger, I had wonderful family. Please don't ever misunderstand me. Loved me. I was very well taken care of. But things weren't always the way I wanted it to be. You know, we weren't as together at times as I wanted it to be, and I also felt like because of that, you know, I was sometimes seen a little bit as an outcast or an underdog. Like my parents weren't together and all my friends' families were. And it always just felt like, and I was always a couple years older than the people that I grew up with. And so it just seemed like I wasn't selected. And I think that might be a little bit of an undercurrent as to why I have such a drive to help people recognize that there's way more in them than they recognize. And so for me, it's just more like shedding light on their potential that they're just not seeing right now. And what's funny about that is, you know, I still struggle with that for myself, of course, right? I mean, we're who we are. But I thought about that. I wonder if like that might be some of it, you know? And so I've just always gravitated towards, I like to teach. I think it's just in my nature. Not that coaching is always teaching. I kind of like to use the term guide a bit more than coach, which is more question, pointing things out, probably more heavy that way. And I don't want to be in a tell mode, but a guide is more of a teacher and a coach, I think, at the same time.
I love that. I think it's interesting, right? Because many of us coaches tend to have learned certain things the hard way. I think
Oh,
sometimes we're passionately inclined to want to help like a younger version of ourselves, not necessarily by age, but just maybe by experience. So that really resonates with me. And then the other thing that you're talking about the difference between coaching and teaching and where that balance lies, I think that's a really interesting topic too, because like you said, as coaches, often it's never our job to provide any answer. Yet, much like you, I really enjoy the teaching element too, where we can maybe step in and fill some of those knowledge gaps. Like, what does
yeah.
the right balance look and feel like for you personally?
Well, you know, I would say this when it comes to coaching and how where I teach and where I guide and how that balances. I mean, it's just more in the conversation. You know, if somebody's stuck, I suppose it's a lot like the principle of grow coaching, right? You have your goal. We talk about that, and it's really asking them, hey, where are you going? What's your purpose? What is it you're trying to accomplish that you're stuck on? And then what's your reality, which is the R. And so we just talk about that, right? Then when you get to the O, which is what are your options? Sometimes people get stuck, right? And they're not sure what to do. And perhaps you've had some experience. Perhaps there's something that you can see that they haven't yet figured out, maybe through your questions and trying to lead them there a little bit, where you can just ask for permission. Hey, I've had this experience actually, or I had something similar. You know, it actually backfired on me. Would you be interested in hearing about it, how it happened with me, and maybe you can learn from that? So that's now I'm giving them permission because if I just tell them, it's compliance versus commitment, in my opinion. And so now they're going to take ownership. So the goal for me is how do I help them help themselves, which has a lot more staying power, even though you can teach and I think really light somebody up, but you're lighting them up for something that they now know and they can now go do. That's, I think, where the light stays, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's interesting, right? I love that you use the word permission, like you ask for the permission to share. I've ran a few different coaching certifications, and it's interesting because myself included early in my coaching career, and a lot of the applicants, the biggest challenge is we are quick to jump to providing the suggestion
I
of
got to tell you.
advice.
And with good intent, right? Like you're excited, you want to help, right? You mean well most of the time, right? There are those who, there's that. But I don't mean to interject, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Well, and again, right, a lot of us get into coaching. Why? Because we want to help people. And it takes almost intentional practice and repetition to understand that the best way to help people is not just to throw a solution at them, because it might stick temporarily, but it's not necessarily going to resonate or last in the same way as them coming to their own solution. So yes, we need to provide the insight and the guidance and the opinions, but it's within the right windows where those fit. Like, and I'm curious for you when you reflect even on just your coaching career from when you started coaching and teaching to where you are now, how has your philosophy changed or shifted in any
Well,
particular?
I think it's in and around this, right? Like my intent, I think, was always good. I mean, I just don't feel like I've got a whole lot of malicious intent. I don't think I do. But I'd say that earlier when we were talking about like maybe a little bit of the reasons why I kind of gravitate towards this because of my early days, it's a cautionary reminder as well because, I could exhibit bias unintentionally but with good intent, right? Because I didn't have something. I want to make sure that you, MJ, have something. And so I almost will myself upon you in some way, even though my intent's really good, it doesn't mean that it's actually going to be good, if that makes sense, right? So I'd say early on in my days, for sure, when I first started coaching, and coaching for what it's worth doesn't have to be a professional setting. I mean, I just taught this week a bunch of emerging leaders. Some of them aren't even leaders yet. But I tell them, hey, you actually are a leader. Just because you aren't managing a team right now of anybody, you're absolutely a leader in all that you do. You're leading somebody. Somebody's following you. You may not know it, but they are, right? And some you do. And so we're all in a position to coach. And, I think it's human nature to want to feel relevant, to want to feel heard and seen. And so if you're in coaching, you might want some attaboys or attagirls, pats on the back, like, hey, they took my idea, when really, I think the higher law of coaching is more around you just sit back and you just like, you hope you never get mentioned, it's like all their idea. They came up with it, and you're just sitting back going, inside, you're going, yeah, this is awesome, right? If you need to be on a soapbox, you might want to rethink your profession,
Well, but it's
at least as a coach.
yeah, but like you said, I think it's so common, right? Especially early on to want to get some of those quick wins because it will push that
Yeah.
then yourself of like I need proof and evidence that I can do this, that I am helping
Right.
that.
That's the rub, right? That's the rub. Because you have to be willing to talk about yourself a little bit and some of the things you're able to do. There's a place for that. And I guess my position right now and kind of what I'm talking about is it's a little different. But I completely understand that. And that's very hard for me. I mean, I do not do well with a megaphone. I just don't.
Yeah.
When it's about me. I mean, if it's about you, oh, you know, the world's going to come to you. But that's just kind of how it is. So for me,
Yeah, yeah. That's really interesting. Like I guess another question to back onto this conversation or to ride on the back of this conversation is what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you faced in your coaching career? Because I think,
yeah.
often on social media, everyone's talking about the highs and the wins and the good stuff. And I think it's a challenge when sometimes that's all we're seeing of people's stories when we innately know that there's always a bit more to it in terms of our own development as a coach. I'm curious, what some of the challenges may have been for you.
Well, I think something that comes to mind immediately is when I just see somebody give up and there's nothing I can do about it. And I want to pull and I want to help, and sometimes push maybe, right? And they just don't have it in them. And maybe it's out of my skill set, and I then refer them to somebody else who's got a greater skill set for that, but they're not interested. Or maybe I've actually bungled it up, and I now have ownership of that. I mean, I haven't had a perfect track record, obviously, and you're not going to. And that's, and so, but if you aren't willing to try, and I think that as the days have gone by and I've gotten a bit more wise, I've had, the fear has reduced and the courage has gone up to have tough conversations. So next week, I'll be with a group of people that have had some issues. They're a bunch of leaders at an organization, and I'm going to be teaching them conflict management, right? And so I was selected to do that because of my skill set and my demeanor and my ability to, kind of take the air out of the room when it maybe shouldn't be there. And so that doesn't mean I look forward to this meeting, and this afternoon with these folks, because I don't know what'll come of it, and I need to be very careful. But that's helped me over time because it wasn't so easy in the beginning, for sure. I mean, that's, you do want to defend yourself, especially if there's personal attacks, and it's easy to just go, oh, and get emotional. And so over the years, I've managed to manage the emotional part of the brain a lot better.
Yeah.
And that means not just in hostile moments or difficult moments, but in sad and frustrating and disappointing and gosh dang, come on, MJ, kind of moments when they don't and they don't want to.
Hmm. That's such a good point, Rob, because you're right. I think again, we get into it because we want to help people, right? We want to help people learn to solve their own problems. And it is a tough lesson to learn when you inevitably come across a client or a situation where, regardless of the best of your intentions and efforts, change
Yeah.
is not possible, right? And I think that's a hard lesson for us to learn, to really look at the coach client relationship and get clear on, okay, what can we control? What are we responsible for in this engagement? And can I really accept or relinquish control of the things that aren't mine to change? And if that doesn't play out the way that I would ideally like it to, can I not see it as a reflection of my value or worth as a coach? Because I think it's hard for us to not take, like maybe a failed coach client relationship personally and look at it and say, what did I do wrong? Of course, it's always good to assess objectively and learn, right? There's always lessons learned because we're not perfect. But I think there is a tendency to take it more personally than we need to. When the reality is it's a co-creative relationship, right? Sometimes I'll compare it to a personal trainer working with someone on a fitness goal.
Hmm.
Provide the guidance, we can provide the support, but we can't get on the machine and do the reps for them, and there's only so much that we can do to affect that change.
Yeah, and as I hear you, I'm in agreement. And I sometimes there was probably times where I should have quit sooner, not quit, but like held back sooner. And then there were times where I for sure should have pushed harder to try to inspire them to do another rep, right? Or to get in one more set, if we're going to use the workout analogy, right? Because people need to be cheered on, and there's lots of ways to cheer people on. And as a coach, it might be between meetings, it might be between the times you actually talk where you send them a video, you send them somebody else talking or teaching something, and maybe that will resonate because they get a little bit used to your voice, right? And so I think that we have to provide a bit of surround sound. We were talking about hearing and listening this week in one of my sessions, the difference between the two. And are a mom, and so this, and my wife, we've got 5 kids, and so if you're in a crowded area in a crowded room and one of your kids starts crying and there's a bunch of other kids, the voice, the sound, right? And you're familiar with it, and so you're able to cut out the other stuff. But I think sometimes your voice isn't the right voice for your client, and you have to be willing to say, hey, is this right? I haven't sensed that there's been a lot of movement on your side. Is it something about me? Am I doing something or not fulfilling something? Be open and have that conversation. That in of itself might elicit some real talk where they've just not shared a whole lot with you about some issue and they just haven't confided in you yet. Maybe it's a trust gap. Maybe it's just they're afraid. I mean, it could be a whole bunch of things, and so having the courage to have a conversation, again, it's the idea as to how do we add some discernment so we can both get to where we're both wanting to go. And in the case of a coaching situation, it's helping them get where they're trying to go, right?
Yeah. Well, and what I love about that is, again, the discernment, even early on, right? Like when we're talking about potentially working together, again,
Yeah.
as a coach, we naively can be like, I want to and I can help everybody. And therefore, sometimes we will take on clients, even if intuitively we have a sense that maybe it's not the right fit. I think early on, at least, I think over time, you get a sense of what the right client is to work with you. You get a clearer sense of what it is you have to offer, and you can kind of figure that out. But I'm curious if you've ever found yourself in that place where you're taking on clients that maybe instinctually you're like, I'm not, like something doesn't necessarily feel right.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So early days, you figure it out, you're just going to muscle through it, right? I've been in a lot of sales roles. I've taken on sales clients that I knew up front, this is going to not go well, but I just wanted the revenue, right? I needed to hit the number. My focus, my purpose was off. And as time went by, I learned to fire clients. I learned to just tell them, I don't think we're going to be a good fit, and sometimes that's a jarring conversation. It could be that when you fired somebody, and I've fired people before, those aren't great times. But if it's your fault and you've hired the wrong person, you got to own up to that, right? At some level. And I have been fired, and so I know what that's like. And I can think of one time when I did, I was wrongly fired, right? But it was actually great that it happened. It jarred me and it caused me to go, whoa, and it recalibrated everything about what was going on in my world. And I completely changed careers. So it was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It often is in hindsight, right? But I think what we're talking about is important because if you're a coach and if you're relatively new or starting out, there is a bit of a learning process to it, right? I think
Oh,
sometimes it's
yeah.
a bit of a pressure, it seems, in the coaching space right now to have it all figured out before you've even started. And that will keep a lot
Yeah.
of people stuck, right? Or paralyzed. And
Yeah.
I think part of it is accepting, hey, early on, like you don't know what you don't know. You go into it with the best of intentions. You have a growth mindset, right? You embrace that
Right.
in with certain clients, you'll get a clearer sense of what's the right fit for you and the right fit for them. And you figure it out a bit as you go. But I don't know what your take on it is, but I feel like there's such a pressure to
Oh,
know
yeah.
all with crystal clarity before you even begin. And that's why so many people are stuck.
Well, that's right, and I feel like it's just a cultural norm to just have your answer immediately. AI isn't helping. It doesn't do the work that you personally need for you. It does work that you need to do that's not you, but it doesn't do you. And there's a major difference, right? And I feel like the human interaction is still it's the only thing that changes. It's like psyche to psyche, soul to soul, right? Spirit to spirit, so to speak. Psyche is the Greek word for spirit, and so call it what you want. It can be your soul. However, it's the inner you. It doesn't have to be, gospel related per se, but it is who you are. AI just doesn't provide it. It can be a great guide. It could give you some helps here and there, but it's not going to give you the resonance that you need through a human interaction.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of that self-discovery, even as a coach, is never ending, right? Again, back to the
Yeah.
personal trainer analogy. It's like if I'm going to coach people, I need to continue to invest in my own learning and development in whatever it is I'm coaching. And I think sometimes coaches can fall a bit stagnant or
Oh,
set
yeah.
their ways in terms of this is the ideology, this is the
But
approach.
it's comfortable, MJ. Why should I do anything different?
Well, why should I? I'm curious what your answer to that question would be.
Well, if it's comfortable, you need to probably rethink what you're doing. We work really hard to make it so that it feels easy to do something. And so I love baseball. I love throwing a football. If I can take a ball and throw it, I love it. It's fun. And I've done it so many times that just about in any position, I've tried to throw the ball in baseball. And so I can be laying on the ground and I'm sure I could still hit you. You could be behind me. I'm probably going to be able to hit you the first few times, you know? And so that I think is because I've practiced and I've gotten comfortable and I'm capable, but I can still get better at that. And if I just get satisfied with that all the time, I'm not going to be better than I could be. I mean, it's just like anything. So I think it's the same with coaching, you know. I mean, time and experience provide you with new perspectives and learnings, and it's on your responsibility. It is your responsibility to do something about that. If you become stagnant, I mean, the Dead Sea is called the Dead Sea because there's nothing flows in and nothing flows out. That's why it's called the Dead Sea. We don't want to be that, right? You become putrid water, so to speak. Like there's nothing exciting about you anymore. So,
And as you're saying that, I'm thinking of why, like, that's a reminder to me as to why it's so important to stay connected to the purpose, right? Like,
yeah.
to whatever the legacy is behind your desire to coach, because that allows you to kind of create those process goals that you can always move towards, right? And I think sometimes in the day to day or the mundane or the meeting to meeting, it can be easy to lose sight of that. Like, why is it that I'm really doing this? And when we replug into that, that's when we get like the motivation and inspiration to continue to learn, to continue to grow.
Can I give you a quick example?
Totally,
So this is
please.
a personal example. So two of my boys went back to school this fall. And one, it was his first. The other had been before. One of them, they both love to play the games, gaming. But one is like all in, has his YouTube channel and he's played a lot. And needless to say, I was worried about him going out to school and he, was trying to figure out he was going to bring his machine out. But he was also trying to figure out how to let go of some of his life, that he knew was kind of prohibiting him from, growing more, right? And so I don't remember how it came up, but I think he asked me. But I just said to him, I go, as he was wrestling with this computer, do I bring this thing? I need to get a laptop too. And I said, and I just kind of like said to him, hey, why don't you consider leaving the game thing behind and find out what you're capable of? And that's it. That's all I said, right? And he just kind of looked at me, And to his credit, the kid didn't take it. He
Wow.
didn't take it. And his life's changed. I mean, and I'm not, besmirching people who game or anything like that. He still plays, but it is like a tenth of what he was before. And now he has discovered himself. He's found some things. He's thriving, and it is just that right there, whether it's my kid or it's you, I feel the same. I'm just lit up when I see somebody discover what they're capable of.
Mm, that's amazing. Well, and
And he did all the work,
yeah,
right? I mean, he did all the work. He left it.
yeah,
And that wasn't easy for him. He
no.
left it, you know? So anyway, I didn't
I
mean to interject.
No, of course. I think some of it is in that questioning, though, right? Why don't you leave it to find out what you're capable of rather than why don't you leave it and do something else instead? Like,
That's exactly
very
right.
different wording, right? And so the buttons you're pushing in terms of the way that they're processing the possibilities is much different. And that leads me to another question that I had for you, which is like, as a coach, once you're in it, it's hard to take the coaching hat off sometimes, right? Like we find ourselves kind of using that coaching lens to view everything, whether it's work related, whether it's personal
Yeah.
relationships. I don't know what that evolution for you has been like. Do you feel comfortable or capable of taking it off? Has it ever been like detrimental in terms of personal relationships, in terms of always trying to either coach or teach the people around you, or have you found for the most part
Yeah.
good?
No, I think I'm way better than I once was for sure. But when I get energized about something, it's hard for me to turn it off, if I'm being honest. Like, I think you know this. I posted probably about 3 weeks ago, I bought a Tesla. And there's two people in my orbit in a week and a half that within 2 days of me telling them about mine, they ordered one. So like on Monday, I was at I was in voting line on Monday or early voting. Somebody shows up and they're right there with me. Like, I mean, it was very odd, right? It was no accident. So next thing you know, the husband comes and they're both standing there and we're in line. And I'm like, well, isn't this interesting? So why are we together? And then they told me like, oh, no, we drove in separate cars. And I said, yeah, I just got a new one. And then they told me they had three cars that have 250,000 miles on them. And I'm like, I've been there, and next thing you know, I'm telling them about what I bought. And they're asking me like, we were thinking about it. And 2 days later, I swear to you, because I got an email saying, hey, thanks for referring us. So and so bought, ordered their Model Y. So sometimes, I mean, that's great, but I think, I still struggle to turn it off sometimes.
Uh,
Yeah.
well,
And
it's
it's again, it's because of the intent is just so strong. So if there's a fault, it's that, but it's still a fault.
mm,
A good fault is still a fault.
well, but like you said, I think sometimes it's just that innate ability, right? To see
Yeah.
things in a bit of a different light, to be genuinely curious, to want to help people. With that comes this capacity to influence other people, which is a blessing. Do you ever find it overwhelming? Do you ever feel like that a pressure to do that, or like the ability to do it is a bit overwhelming?
That's a good question. I mean, pressure. I mean, there are certain scenarios, I suppose, where, there's probably both ways, right? There are some situations where I feel like this is actually right where I should be. I should step up, and they don't want it, or they haven't asked for it. And that's hard, you know? And then there are, of course, the times where please don't call on me. Whether it's just I'm just like no energy or, I just kind of already see the outcome no matter what I try. I can just still see they're not ready. So I don't know. I don't know if I have 100% clarity on that one just yet, and I think that's okay, right? And some of it too is, we used to always kid about Linda's mom, my wife's mom. She passed away with cancer, fought it a few times, and as her days became more and more numbered, she just said whatever she wanted to. I mean, it was over with, like if she was bothered by something, she just said it.
Uh,
And there was something admirable about that. Maybe timing wasn't always great, but was it not great for the person receiving it or. And so I feel like I'm getting better and better at just being who I am. And if it's not right for somebody, not in an obnoxious, like forceful way, but listen, it's what it is. And I've got my life too, and I can't walk on eggshells all the time, right? So,
yeah. Well, and that's it though, right? I think it's so important for us to have those spaces or places where we can go either internally or externally because it can feel like a weight, right? Like, and it's a
yeah.
weight that's self-inflicted because we want to help so many people and improve the world and all of these things,
Yeah.
but that we create space for our own humanity at times.
I'll give you an example. Years and years ago, I was asked to be a leader at church, and it's a voluntary position. So I was asked, and I was in it for 5 years, by the way. I did not get paid.
Mm.
And when I was first in that role, people would call with their challenges. Now, I'm not professionally coaching them, I'm just in a leadership role, right? And they would call, and I would answer right away, right away. I would go, get up and go, get up and go. And because I was just a doer. But I learned not too long thereafter to maybe not answer that call, maybe not respond right away, maybe not go visit till the next day. I learned to let things breathe a little bit more. And I've taken that and I've applied it to, the different career roles that I've had. And I think it applies in coaching as well. Sometimes when you see something and you can do something about it and it could help them like right away, it may not be the right thing to do actually. Maybe let it sit for a little bit. And coaching is a little bit like that, right? And I was coaching them actually without ever responding. I was giving them signals. And more times than not, for what it's worth, that it resolved itself. And so if I'd gone right away or called right away, I actually might have made it worse, or I might have prolonged the problem or not given them the ability to know that they could do it and handle it for themselves. I'm not saying every situation is that way, but more are that way, I think, than less.
Mm, that's so
I've
important.
carried that principle around with me. Um, I'm grateful I learned that.
Well, and the pause, I think, is for them, and it's also for you. It can be, right? In certain instances, again, this idea we want to help people, we get into it for those reasons. And I think it can also be easy to lose ourselves and our own
Yeah.
sense of meeting our own needs and our own responsibilities to ourselves because we can become so intertwined with what's going on with our clients and how we can best serve them. Like,
Yeah.
I know that you nowadays, you're posting all kinds of different fitness stuff. It seems that that is a part of your life. Like, I'm curious, what has been your journey with self-care as a coach, and where are you
Oh,
with it?
ebbs and flows like anything, I suspect. I wish I could be like maybe a mutual friend of ours, Elijah. He's like every day, he's
Oh,
got it figured, right? And now, but he's got his things too, right? And he'll say that. He's a very humble guy, and we all have that, right? About we see different things in people, and we're like, geez, man, they got it figured out, and nobody does in most ways. Yeah, it ebbs and flows. I like to do mentally exerting hard things, I did a 50-mile run. I never ran over 2 miles most of my life. And then I found out about an ultra marathon. So like studied it and learned how you kind of prepare. And, about a year and a half later, year and 3/4 later or so, I did it. And then I quit. I ran for 2 years, and after that second year, I hit 2,000 miles. January 1st, I did not run. I shouldn't have had my end year. I should have had the calendar year a little different place because then I probably would have kept going. Food for thought. That season was tough, man, that winter. I like to do things like that are harder. They're not the norm, and I like to do things that are a little bit longer because you're left with yourself at a certain point in your mind. And I've learned that my mind is trying to just help me change direction by shutting my body down. I don't know if I said that just right, but the example would be if you've done a long bike ride, and you've made it and that could be like miles and miles and miles, and it's a sustained effort, right? That same sustained effort, or it's a long run, it's the same sustained effort. At a certain point, you might have an experience called bonking. And you know this from sports, right? That term bonk, where you just like all your energy goes out and you're like, I can't even, I'm wiped out. You almost want to take a nap kind of thing, and you just can't do it anymore forever. I was convinced that that was because of lack of electrolytes or food. And that could be true. But if you've been doing those things and it happens, it's really actually your brain telling you the processor, the computer's been running a long time at this exact same speed. So we're going to just shut it down. And so it signals all these emotions. So you quit doing what you've been doing. And so the trick is to either exert yourself even more or slow down, but do back and forth. Like go back and forth and just really mix it up for a bit. I've done it. It not all of a sudden it goes away.
wow.
So like your heart can beat forever, right? Until it's just told not to anymore. And it's the same with all the other muscles in our body. The brain's just telling us, you're going to take a break. And so I'm going to motivate you by causing this pain over here, or I'm going to cause that pain over there. And that's hard to let go because now you've got this triggered experience, right? And the same thing can happen in a professional role. I got fired. Now I'm scared I'm going to get fired again, or I I blew it as a leader with this person and that hire, and now I'm probably going to blow it again. And so, you're coaching somebody through that, right? Or they're just too good at, public speaking. That's not me. Well, you're right until you find out that you're actually not. So, that's just an example of why I like to do some of the athletic stuff I do.
Well, and it's again this great idea of leading by example. Like, you're doing something that is informing you in a way that's going to benefit not only you but also the people that you're, advising or coaching.
Hope so.
Beautiful.
And
Yeah.
if they does it, I don't care because I'm still doing it. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think we should never sleep on that though, right? Because again, we talk
Right.
about as coaches, our capacity to influence other people. It's not only in what we say, it's in what they see us do, right? So to me, that highlights the importance of continuing to push ourselves out of our comfort zone, to learn new things,
Yeah.
to apply what we
Yeah.
preach, because it's not
because
only
it's
for our,
natural.
yeah, but it's not only for our clients' benefit. I think it's for our own benefit in terms of our own
Sure.
confidence and sustainability, that we don't feel like a hypocrite sitting in the chair telling someone to do something that we're not practicing ourselves. So it's so important that we're always pushing our own edges.
Yeah, and I think that that's really, really key. What you said is it needs to be natural. Like I didn't, while I posted something this week about going on a ruck, I didn't like go out and go, oh, how do I do something totally different so I can post it? I just did what I was naturally doing. And I had no intention actually at all of creating a video on that ruck. Zero. I just went out, and I was listening to an Audible book and ideas just started kind of flooding into my mind. I'm like, huh. And so then I thought, oh, you know what? I should just capture this. I just pulled out my phone and I did it. But I didn't go out with that plan. I
No.
did not go out with that plan. It was not on my radar.
Yeah. Which is a proof that you're doing it for the right reasons, right?
Yes,
You're just
that's
showing
right.
up authentically. Because I think that's a really good point too. Like if you're a coach and you're trying to figure out what's the right thing to say or do, and it is staged, it's not going to feel good for you. And it's obviously not going to resonate with the clients because they can see through fake versus authentic.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good, good. Okay. Thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it, Rob. I like to wrap up on one question, which is a reflective question, which is if you could travel back in time to, let's say, 18-year-old Rob thing, what would it be and why?
That was a very pivotal time in my life, by the way, that exact year. Um, I don't know. I would probably say something like, you're going to be just fine. There's way more in you than you even have a clue about right now. So just keep going. You're going to be fine.
Why?
Oh, I don't know, because I mean, like anybody, I think we have our doubts and we're unsure, and maybe we feel like we've been slighted out in the world, and this rug was pulled out, and it's not fair, and it's easy to fall into those traps. And I didn't have the ideal, in a lot of ways. The things that were like inner me that I didn't talk to anybody about, I didn't have it. I didn't have some of those things, and I think I was probably still wondering, oh gosh. But actually something happened that year, and then all of a sudden I could see, like, you know what, actually this could work out. But I still had my doubts. Like, is it you though? Are you capable of this, man? Are you going to be able to pull this off, kind of a thing? And, obviously knowing what I know now, I sure could. I sure could.
That's beautiful. The power of self-assurance.
Yeah. And that's today, right? Like maybe in a week, I might feel a little less like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, I think that's the beauty of it too, is realizing that yes, we are coaches, but we are also humans. And I think a lot of times when we can embrace our own humanity, our own flaws, it actually allows us to build more trust and rapport with our clients, more credibility, and it actually fuels our ability to have the impact we want to have, right? We don't have to have this perfect front on all the time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I can't remember if this is Walt or Emerson, or yeah, I can't remember who it was, but the quote that I remember, and I've known this since I was probably 20, is that which we persist in doing becomes easier and easier. Not that the nature of the thing has changed, but our power to do has increased. And I just love that. I just love that. So persist.
Yeah. What a beautiful way to wrap it up. Well, thank you so much again for your time today, Rob.
Yeah, MJ, it's humbling to have you invite me into your world. I appreciate it. I really do.